Hey friends, in this video I'm going to show you how I used pivot and slide to alter a pattern so it better fit my body. Now I am not a fitting expert. Nancy Zieman is really the expert at pivot and slide, and if you're interested in her very good and precise instructions on how to use it, I've linked all that information below, but I'm going to show you in this video how I approached it. There are chapter links down below if you'd like to skip forward or backwards in this video. Now, as I mentioned, I'm using Nancy Zieman's pivot and slide method to alter this pattern. I don't know if Nancy created this method or if she just popularized it, but she's really the master of it, and she has so many great resources that I have linked below. I've used pivot and slide several times for mostly tops, occasionally dresses. And I love this method because I don't have to hack up my pattern pieces. I can trace them out, make the changes very easily. There isn't a lot of math involved, just a little tiny bit. And I don't have to tape pattern pieces. Sometimes I'm not quite as accurate when I'm hacking things apart and taping them. What Nancy figured out is that the big four patterns for many years, still somewhat to this day, and some other pattern companies, made the assumption that when our bust, waist, and hips got bigger, our shoulders became broader. So a lot of the time when we need to size up for our bust, waist, or hips, the shoulders are larger. If we go up in a bigger size, the shoulders are suddenly bigger, which is why we wind up with shoulders that aren't in the right place. Nancy has you start with the measurement here, across the chest here to the creases underneath your arms. And that's how you select your pattern size. Across here, I'm 16 inches, which means per Nancy, I should select a size 16 pattern. Coincidentally, the pattern I am using for this is New Look 6707, which I have sewn before. I'm linking up here. This pattern only goes to size 16. It's a US size 4 to 16 or a Euro size 30 to 42. There's no way I'm fitting in a size 16, but my shoulders fit in a size 16, which is why I decided to use pivot and slide, because I can start with my shoulders and pivot out to add or pivot in to subtract, and then slide up or down to add length, add or remove length. We start with looking at the body measurements that are listed on your pattern. In this case, for a size 16, these are all in inches. Bust is 38, waist is 30, and hip is 40. I'm not fitting into that. No way, no how. Then I wrote down my own personal measurements. And a mistake that I made in the past is wearing a different bra. I made sure I wore the bra that I would normally be wearing when I wear this top. So I wrote those down and I compared my body measurements to the body measurements that the pattern has, so I could see how much of a difference there was. The other thing that I took a look at was the finished garment measurement that was written on the pattern tissue. And in this case, the bust is 38 inches, but the finished garment measurement is 43 inches, which says they wanted 5 inches of wearing ease. Now, would I be happy with 5 inches of wearing ease? Probably. Nancy Zieman says that you want to have, I think it was about 3 to 4 inches for the bust, about the same for the waist and the hip. So I made sure that I would be happy with that much ease, because I know that's how much they have built in when they designed the pattern. And then I decided how much I had to add to each part of the body in order for it to fit me right. And I decided that I needed to add 5 inches to the bust, the waist, and the hips for this to fit me the way that I wanted it to. Now, in Nancy's book, she says if you're adding more than 1 inch to each side of the pieces, you should really add like a strip of fabric. So you would be extending out the pattern. I didn't do that. If you're a purist, or if you're adding more than an inch to each of the pieces, to each of the measurements on the pieces, then you might want to take a look at what Nancy says and how she suggests you proceed there. And I also decided that I wanted to add 1.5 inches in length because I wanted this to hit me kind of below the broadest part of my stomach. Now I'll show you exactly how I went about tracing out the pattern pieces and making the necessary changes to them so that I could cut and sew. Starting with the back pattern piece. I know that I have to do a high round back adjustment on this, so I have made that change on the pattern piece that has not been adjusted for increased size. I traced the pattern off here in purple, and that's without any modifications except for the high round back adjustment. Now we have to add, and before we do that, we have to decide where we're going to pivot from. And for this back piece, we are going to be pivoting from the upper shoulder. So here's the shoulder seam, the neck seam, and you will mark a spot 5/8 of an inch in because there's a 5/8 inch seam allowance. And that red dot there, this is 5/8 of an inch in from both sides. That's my pivot point. This is super easy. We start by marking how much space we want to add. And we're going to add, I'm adding, for my shape, from a size 16, I am adding 1¼ inches on each of the back pieces. On each side of the back piece. So that's 2½ inches I'm adding on that side. It's one piece for the back because it's cut on the fold. So I have marked over here where that is. Now, I'm going to take a pin and I'm aligning the pattern pieces up with the tracing. It's especially important to be aligned here where our pivot point is. Let's see if I can zoom in a little bit on that for you. They're aligned. That's not my pivot point. Now we will pivot it around until the pattern piece is there. Okay? Now, I will trace. Actually, this is aligned better. We want to make sure that shoulder is aligned there. Now I will trace around the arm side. This is going to be my new line. Yeah. Now, zoom back out a little bit here. Now, if I continue tracing this way, I can see the traced line underneath here, and I'm going to add, almost 3 inches down at the hip. I don't need that much. So I need to pivot here, the underarm seam as well. So again, I'm going to mark 5/8 of an inch, which is, this is going to be my second pivot point. So leave this the way it is. Put this in to pivot. And now I'm just going to pivot this down. And I need basically the same 1¼ inch all the way down. So I can check and here and make sure I have 1¼ inch. I can see my traced line through there, so 1¼ inch here. Right. So I'm just going to pivot that, align to that dot, and trace down. Make sure to include your notches. Okay. The other thing I need to do for this particular piece is I want to add 1¾ inches of length. And this is a super simple adjustment. I'm going to slide. So 1¾ inches is here. Mark that in a couple of places. And I just slide the pattern piece down, following on the straight line there. Use some weights. And I will draw the new hem. So these lines up here where I did not pivot or slide, those remain the same, as does the center fold line. I've added at the side, I haven't changed the arm side, and I've added length. This is the back piece. Now we'll do the front. Same as with the back, I have already traced it using black lines, and I have marked here in pink where I want to add. So this is 1 1/8 inch here and 1½ inch at the length. Exactly the same as on the back. I have marked 2 pivot points. The first one is here on the upper shoulder, again in 5/8 of an inch from top and side, because we have a 5/8 inch seam allowance, and then also at the bottom of the arm side, 5/8 of an inch. Line this up so that the neck, everything is aligned. Put my pin in, and I will pivot out. Pivoting out. There we go. And I've now reached my pink spot. I'll just add some pattern weights. And I will draw the new stitching line. The arm side. Put 2 wide there. Take that in. Down here. And the bottom of the dart. And just like with the back, if we continue on this trajectory, we will be adding quite a bit at the sides. If you need to, just do that. I only want to add 1¼ inch. So again, I will leave the pattern in the new position, stick the pin in at that second pivot point. I'm going to pivot down. There's one of my marks. There are my marks right there with the dart. I don't know if I'm doing this right. This is what I did. I extended the dart like this, and then I just did my tracing there. Now we will slide to move the bust dart down. So I have the pattern lined up with the center line here because that's remained constant. And this here is the original dust point. My bust point is there. I will slide this straight down. I can see the bust point through my tissue paper. Slide it straight down. And I'm going to slide it straight out. And there we go. Now, I've just slid the dart down. I'll mark it. And this upper mark here is the same point. That's the bust dart started. When I did the pivot. And then just slide again to add the length. So start again at the center line that's remained constant. Slide it down so it matches those dots. And trace. And now I make sure this lines up there. And that's all there is to it. It took me a couple of tries to get the traced pattern pieces to where I wanted them to be. I wasn't happy the first time I tried it, so I did it a second time. And then it was time to decide exactly what fabric I wanted to use and start cutting. Here's the fabric I'm using. This is a piece of Liberty Tanalon that I bought in May in 2018 at Liberty. I've been holding on to this for the right project. I didn't want to make another button down because I don't tend to wear button downs. I think this blouse will be the right pattern for this. This fabric holds a little bit of crispness, so maybe the sleeves will have a nice puff to it, but it's also wonderful for garments for warmer weather and for travel because it doesn't get really wrinkled and it washes well and it sews up so nicely. Before I cut, I made one change that was not included in the pivot and slide, and that was I added a little bit to the band for the sleeve. Because we didn't change the arm side, we didn't have to change anything with the sleeve. However, I think that my arms may be a little bit bigger than a standard size 16 arm, so indeed they are. So I measured them and I wound up adding a total of probably an inch to the length of the sleeve band. I didn't have to change anything on the sleeve because there's gathering. And a longer band just meant that the gathers would be slightly more dispersed. Made that change, started cutting. I spent a great deal of time aligning the front center so that the pattern would match without thinking that the band crosses over. So if this just butted up, it would be really nicely matched, but you can't tell. Regardless, this is a print. It's very difficult to, it's a busy enough print that it's difficult to see that it doesn't match. For interfacing on this, since this is a nice fabric and I didn't want to use a fusible interfacing, I used silk organza, which worked really well. I just stitched it in, made sure it was flat, and it works really nicely with this fabric. It doesn't add any bulk at all. And then I just sewed. Tried it on a couple of times. It fit really well. Once the entire project was complete, after I had done the buttons and everything, then I took a look in the mirror to see what the back looked like. Because when I made the previous version of this, I did add fisheye darts. And again, the back didn't look great. It just kind of had a big bubble in it. Normally, I would have done a sway back adjustment or something. In this case, again, just as the last version, I added fisheye darts into the back. I just pinned them in to see where I thought they were going to work, tried it on, pinned, basted, tried it on. I think they're pretty good. They might not be in exactly the right place. However, I can always adjust the fisheye darts slightly. I'm happy with how this turned out. It certainly fits 1,000 times better than it ever would have from the envelope because, well, the envelope was going to be 3 sizes too small. Have you used Pivot and Slide? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments because a lot of you know so much more than I do, and I'd like to learn from you. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're well, and I'll see you again soon.